How many times have we talked about black eyes like a doll's eyes? How many times have we referenced it, joked about it? Horror in America is a white woman getting chased or hurt, a white woman in trouble. And that's depicted in cinema from Birth of a Nation to King Kong to Carrie, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and beyond. So when you see that white woman in trouble, you know there's something out there. And in this case, there's something out there. There's something in the water, and it's coming for you. It's coming for her, but it's coming for you. It's coming for your 4th of July. Tonight, Spielberg, 1975. You know the film.
I think there are a few films in the canon of cinema that have that level of recognition, have that level of beloved and constant replaying in the head of anybody who loves movies. I mean, it's been 50 years, I guess. Almost 50 years. And this is a film that continues to grab a hold of the culture. The question becomes why? What is it about this specific film? Is it the actors? Is it the story? Is it the shark that doesn't work? Is it the mythology and the legend behind the making of the film? This is a very difficult episode for me to, I watched this film twice, and maybe a hodgepodge of scenes that would have made up a third or fourth viewing in preparation for this discussion today. And the more I watched the film, the more I became intimidated by a lack of being able to bring anything to it. At this point, 49 years in, I really have to wonder what else can be said about Steven Spielberg's Jaws. What can be said that hasn't already been said? What aspect of the film and the filmmaking, the story behind the making of the film can be addressed that would bring something new to it? I don't know, except for it's our personal relationship to the film. The only thing that I can really say that I bring to this discussion is the personal feelings that it elicits from me over a close to 50-year span of watching this movie, both on television, in the old pan and scan version, through to the widescreen TVs and Blu-ray, DVD into Blu-ray, revivals in Los Angeles at the American Cinematheque, the Egyptian Theater, the Aero Theater. I think I might have seen it at the ArcLight at one point. But it is a film that is told with such skill, with such passion, with such stupid ignorance on the part of a filmmaker who had no idea that what he was trying to do could not possibly be done. That not only is the film, but nearly every aspect of the film is legendary. So let's dive in. Let's figure this one out. Let's see where the tide takes us on this one, because I'm very interested in figuring out if we're even able to bring something new to this discussion. Where do you want to go with it, Mr. Chavez?
Usually you ask me about my relationship to the film. I want to ask you, but even beyond that, once you get through that, I want to know some of this backstory. I want to know some of these production stories, some of these more famous ones, and then we can get into the meat of it. We know that it's a masterpiece. We know that it's a blockbuster, that it's perhaps, what is it, maybe the first blockbuster. We know it's It's a storytelling masterpiece. It's his. It's the
Yeah.
framing, the cutting. Closer to Schreider. Closer. Closer. Now zoom in.
I'm glad
We
you
know
noticed
that.
that. Yeah, that's
We, I mean,
it's a
we
powerful
know it.
moment. Yeah.
We know the. It's not noticing. It's like if you've watched this enough, you've gotten beyond just watching the movie. Now we're looking at the vocabulary. Now we're looking at
Hmm.
the technique, but we're still lost in the story. We're still lost in John Williams' music, the leitmotif, the shark theme. We know it's iconic. We know it's well made. We know it's cinematic. To me, I think it makes basically all his other shit pale in comparison. Um, I'm aware that fucking Steven Spielberg is a great filmmaker. Do I care about Steven Spielberg's films on that level? Not particularly. There are a handful of films that I do go to that I think are above the others. The rest of his work is still solid. It's still very well crafted. Um, we've been talking about Nicolas Cage, and we will continue in this fucking long and winding road to continue to talk about him and the arbitrary. It's just what makes certain things work and what makes certain things not
Yeah.
work. It's very mysterious, and there is no like formula. What can we say that hasn't already been said? I mean, there's nothing new under the sun. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that's like biblical. That's fucking Ecclesiastes. You know what I mean? Like this is fucking. We're a couple years later than that. So your relationship to the film to begin, and some of the backstory, like what's the origin? You know, the origin of the shark.
Okay. Well, my relationship to the film is a simple one. It's I can't remember a time when this is probably the oldest film. No, not the oldest necessarily, but this is probably the film that goes back the farthest with me, where I was aware of something going on. I don't remember when I first saw this film. I don't remember how I saw it. I can only speculate based on the technology of the time. I was born in 74, late 74. This came out summer of 75. With that timetable in hand, there's no way that I could have seen this in a theater and been able to process it and remember it. But I remember being in a movie and seeing underwater, the blue night. As I remember that. I remember seeing something like that in a movie theater experience, specifically a movie theater experience, and I can't think of a different film that I would have went to see that. So it's possible that I saw Jaws in a second run, probably in 78 or 79, maybe, when I would have been 4 or 5 years old. The point of it is that it's something that is stuck with me. It's something that I remember. And psychologically, it's a film that until thinking about it today, I didn't realize the psychological, you might want to call it damage, if you would, if you will. I was not aware of the psychological damage experienced through watching this film, because the truth is, I'm afraid of the ocean. I never realized it until sitting down and really digging into this. I mean, think about it. I lived in LA for 20 years. February of 2000 until May of 2020. In that time, I never got into the ocean. Never been.
Really?
Yeah,
No,
I'd been
you've
to the
never
beach.
been in the ocean at all?
I've been in the ocean when I was young, but I don't think I liked it. I think the ocean is a scary, frightening place. And believe me, I know I'm a very realistic person. I know that the likelihood of being attacked by a shark is minimal at best. I think the odds are something like it. You're definitely more likely to be in a car accident than be hit by a shark, but you're also more likely to die of bee stings or be hit by lightning. I've read, and that's wild. That our shape, our 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 mind, our minds, our cumulative minds, are shaped by the power of the imagery in this film. And also, after years of watching, because I'm fascinated by sharks as well, I'm fascinated specifically by great whites. I think it's an incredible creature. I think it's a beautiful animal, and I think in part this film is a sin in the continuing existence of this animal, because
What do you mean?
a lot of what is depicted in the film, as I was watching it last night, I was watching the scene where the Kittner mother has put up the $3,000 reward for anybody who could find and kill the shark. And I see these idiots chumming the waters in these small boats that are out there. And there's a level of ignorance and desire, bloodthirst, and hunger for the money to kill this animal. Number one, the Peter Benchley book that this story is derived from, that Spielberg has made his film, it's a complete fabrication in the sense of, yeah, it's a fictional story, but sharks do not act this way. Sharks do not hunt this way. Sharks, from what I've read and my research from being a kid and, the library nerd that I was and continue to be to this day, sharks did not hunt in this way. There is a sense of territoriality, but also sharks did not hunt human beings with the drive that is depicted in this film, because human beings do not offer the level of nutritional sustenance to make hunting human beings worth it. This is years of reading in Shark Week and all kinds of different documentaries in studying sharks. The expenditure that the great white must put out in order to hunt and kill an animal, human beings don't afford that kind of nutritional value. There's a reason that they hunt seals, a fatty animal that provides great nutrition to them. So in a sense, as much as I love the technique and the thrill of this picture, there is a part of me that hates this picture because of what it has meant to shark populations, and specifically the great white, with these assholes who go out there and say, I want to hunt a great white. I think and this is the bleeding heart in me if you want to dismiss it at that, but I have a real problem with people who want to hunt and kill what I consider to be majestic animals: bears, rhinoceros, elephants, lions, tigers. I think there's an ego involved in being able to kill an animal like that for the sheer calling card of being able to say, I killed this animal. I don't like what it does to the populations. I don't like what it says about us as a species. And as much as I love this film, as I've said and will continue to say, the ignorance that it expends and affords the public, I think, has been dangerous and downright detrimental to shark populations. I mean, that's a conservatives and not a conservative, but a what do you call it? A conservationist attitude regarding
You're
these
fucking shark woke.
Yeah, I am shark woke, I guess. But I like sharks a hell of a lot more than I like people, and I know a lot of people say shit like that, and I don't mean to be dismissive or to jump into the spiel of that, but it is true that there is something incredibly beautiful about an animal that has been here since the dinosaurs and continues to live. If you've ever watched those Shark Week specials, especially Air Jaws, and you see them hunting, you see that animal come out of the water and breach the way it does and get, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 feet out of the water. It is a thing of beauty. And it's amazing to me. So when I see this revenge, when I see this story about a shark coming at these people the way it is, there's a part of me that just kind of laughs at the ridiculousness of it, but is overwhelmed by the skill of the filmmaking. The film is complete bullshit. It's absolutely bullshit. But it's done, it's so skillfully, it's bullshit that is so skillfully done and handled that you have to be in awe. And the fact that it sets up this beautiful story at the beginning of this island that is dependent on tourism and a shark that overwhelms this community and how that plays out. It's great for what it is. And then when you introduce the Richard Dreyfuss character, somebody who's fascinated by great whites, who's fascinated by sharks, always has been, somebody who dedicates themselves to the study and the understanding of the species. I find that captivating. The Brody character, who is a stand-in for all of us, because let's face it, the majority of the people watching this film are ignorant of what these sharks are, of what sea life is, for that matter. He's our stand-in. This is a basic storytelling device. These three characters, and the final introduction of Quint, Robert Shaw's character, who is probably the most captivating because of the speech that we're going to get into. Yeah, but even that, is it fair to say that the Robert Shaw character, that the Quint character, is a wholly original creation, or simply a reimagining of Ahab? And that's a testament to the importance of the history, because I think you're like me and the majority of the people who are listening to this and are of a certain... I don't know. I don't think I've ever met anybody who's ever read Moby Dick, but we all know the story. So...
you never read Moby Dick?
I've never read it. Have you read it?
I read it.
You read it?
But you read more Dostoevsky than me. So,
yes, well, yeah. Yeah.
So you can have your brandy snifter and I can have mine.
Yeah, we can.
I mean,
will say this much: the movie makes me want to watch.
Yeah.
It makes me want to read Moby Dick. I will read Moby Dick before this life is over, God willing.
At this point, it's like, do you know anyone who's heard of Moby Dick?
That's another problem of the illiteracy of our generation.
Fuck having read it. You know what I mean? Like, has anyone have you listened to the Moby Dick podcast?
Yeah.
But yes, I mean, and now we've gone into another fucking area, but keep the post-it note of the backstory and the setup. But I mean, yeah, I go back to where I started, where it's like, this is a 70s horror film, but at the same time, it's got so much other shit.
Yeah.
It's got so many, it's it's not the Amityville horror, it's the Amity horror.
Well, is it a horror film? Is it I think
more than that.
I think this film defies genre.
Of course. I mean, of course. I think the for me, it's like, that's my way in, is seeing it's like a white woman in trouble means be afraid.
Yeah.
In the lexicon of American cinema. And I mean, Slavoj Žižek, I've talked about him a little bit before, philosopher, critic. He's got the Pervert's Guide to Cinema. He's got the Pervert's Guide to Ideology. He talks about, in these films, he stands on sets that are made to look like the sets of these films. And he says, the shark represents, because he uses Marxist theory, he uses Lacanian, which is a subgenre of like Freudian psychoanalytic theory. He's like, well, the shark represents natural disasters, it represents storms, and it can represent immigrants at our gates, at the shores, right? In the same way that the vampire, he doesn't say this, but I'm saying this, and I'm not inventing this, other people have analyzed Dracula in the sense, it's kind of like Dracula, when it emerged, when the character of Dracula travels from the Carpathian Mountains to England, that's about contagion. That's about something that has to do with blood, and these foreigners basically coming and fucking like infecting England. When Mary Shelley, and I'm going away so I can come back.
I understand.
The tide goes out, the tide comes in. I fucking do this all the time. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. People have said, well, there are independence movements going on in the colonies. And this is kind of a reflection of that, where these people are saying, I fucking exist and I have agency. So Slavoj Žižek says it can be what? Again, natural disasters, the shark, that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Storms, this oceanic phenomenon, right? Or immigrants, that one's pretty fucking basic. He talks about, for Castro, in Castro's imagination, Jaws, he saw, Zizek says that Castro, and I don't know how he's sourcing it, whatever. He's saying that Jaws is a Marxist, from a Marxist perspective, you can read it as that in the sense that the shark represents the capitalist system that feeds on average Americans. And when I hear that, I'm thinking, well, look at the fucking small town. Look at the small town, the drama that takes place within the political aspect of the film, which is Amity is basically Martha's Vineyard. And it relies on tourism, particularly in the summer. That's the on season, right? And now, if you have this threat in the water, it's going to discourage tourists from coming to visit. But tourism is the ticket. So what do you need to do for commerce? You have to downplay the threat. We saw this most recently in terms of like COVID. You have to downplay the threat. There's one side that's going to say we need to shut everything down because this fucking thing is a menace. Then there's the other side that says like it doesn't even exist. It's going to, just the thought of it is going to kill commerce. And then there's a middle ground side that's saying, well, can we just get rid of the threat, or can we just try to mitigate this threat and like keep what commerce we can? There's that aspect. On another level, Zizek says that the function of the shark is to unite all our fears so that we can, in a way, trade all of these fears for only one fear alone. So basically, like any good villain, like any good antagonist, or like any good boogeyman, the shark can represent whatever the fuck you want. You can put anything you want on that shark's back, on that dorsal fin, right? Um, and it can basically be a mirror to whatever your fears are. And it's interesting because it's like the fear, but also the fascination. You're afraid of the water, but you still want to see it. You still want to see, what's going on. For me, I see it's like the setup of the film is you have a New York police chief, a New York cop, basically. He leaves all of that to go to this quiet fishing town, this village. And we're in the 70s. We're in the fucking mid 70s. Remember that New York is fucking crazy. New York it had a personality.
Yeah.
Think of the films. If you don't know anything about New York, if you don't know anything about the music or the culture or the scenes or any of this shit in the 70s, think about the films. Death Wish, fucking Taxi Driver the following year. You would have the Son of Sam killings the year after that. The year that Jaws came out, there was a fucking bombing at LaGuardia Airport. He's coming from this crazy high crime beat where you would think, well, this guy's fucking seen it all. But you haven't seen this. You don't know the fucking waters, as you said. The small town politics, the political financial interests, being held responsible for a child's death to the point that he gets fucking slapped in the face by this woman dressed in mourning black clothes, mourning with a U. So we're set up that it's like, well, this guy needs to kill the shark. He needs to set the world right. Not for the money, not for the town, he needs to set it right. Yes, for the town, but not for the town's money. So you have a cop who's afraid of the water, who needs some form of redemption. Then you get the Richard Dreyfuss character, who's an expert. So he needs it's like you said, in this tip, it's a typical kind of like team around the central character.
Yeah.
You need the expert, you need the guru, basically. But then you have a seaman whose destiny is tied to sharks. So that it makes sense that there's a fatedness, there's a poetry, a kismet, this ironic logic that you've got the shark hunter, the salty old fisherman, right? The shark killer who survives shark attacks. Spoiler fucking alert, he meets his end there. You've got the shark observer. He spent his whole fucking adult life or whatever, watching sharks. He's the one who hides after having been put in that cage of his own will. In other words, he's the one that's been looking at sharks as if through a microscope. And now that reversal, he's the one that is basically served to the shark on a platter. But ultimately, he hides from the shark. And then thirdly, the city cop, out of his element, doesn't want to get in the water, is basically inches from the water on just one part of the ship, that's this boat that's sinking, and he kills the shark with a gun. Obviously, he kills the shark with the tank, but he shoots the tank that's in the thing's mouth. So there's an element of each of these characters killing the animal. The barrel and the harpoon is Quint. The tank, the science, the fucking technology is Dreyfuss, and the fucking bullet is the cop. It's basic, but there's a mythology to it. And yes, Quint does go back to Ahab, but in a way that's not only about obsession and ego. It's also there is that, but it's about more than just his own fucking like thing. It's and that goes to the monologue. He had to die there.
It's all there. I mean, it's we. I've used the term paint by numbers many times in describing certain movies, and I don't think this falls too far out of that. I think it becomes there's a language of film, there's a language of storytelling, and it has been said that there's only so many different stories. I think something like 7 stories: boy gets girl, boy loses girl, boy wins girl back. The battle for the South, the battle against nature, all that. And a lot of that is found within this story. I think it really comes down to the human element of how do we relate to it as people. And I think one of the great things about Jaws is that as you're watching it, you can relate to each one of these characters on some level. The paranoia and the obsessiveness of the Quint character, the curiosity of the Hooper character, and the everyman completely out of your depth, completely ill-equipped for the moment. The whole, we're going to need a bigger boat. You're going to need a bigger boat. It's not even we, it's you're going to need a bigger boat mentality. These are real people. These are larger than life in some to some degree, but they're relatable. And I think when you have characters like that are well drawn out and well, you can read the backstory, and with this film, each one is given a backstory. It's hinted to in some respects with Hooper and with Brody, and then it's directly addressed with Quint in such a way as to make you say, "Wow, this guy makes sense." Up until that point, Quint is somewhat cartoonish. He's a character that is very much in keeping with the bravado machismo of a seafaring sailor type of character. This blunt, hard drinking, hard fighting, ass kicking kind of character that takes no shit and is the captain of his own world. But when you see that trauma, and I know that's using a term of today, his trauma, his, whatever the fuck it is that's triggering him, this guy lives in that. He lives in order.
Quentin his genes.
Yeah, yeah, basically. I love that about this film. I love that it slowly goes from being a community story with this doom that has arrived on this island and that is slowly killing things, into 3 men on a boat and the struggle between them. Because you can relate to that. You can understand 3 people who don't understand each other fighting to accomplish a certain goal, and each one doing it for different reasons, each one fascinated by a different aspect of this adventure. Brody is doing it because he's the chief of police. It is his job. His job is to serve and to protect. Hooper is there to study, to understand, to grow in understanding, and to answer questions that before were either unanswered or hadn't even been asked at that point. And Quint is Shiva the Destroyer. He probably not Shiva, but you know what I'm talking about, where he's just, I must destroy all. I must when you hear his story, you realize the sheer revenge aspect of it. The Ahab. And Robert Shaw performs everything up until that monologue and anything after that monologue with such glee that it's one of the great performances in film. It really is. If
Oh,
Robert Shaw is remembered for anything, it's not for the Bond villain. It's not for The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, or Black Sunday, all of which he was great in. It's for Quint. He's remembered for Quint. It's the character that for people who don't even know Robert Shaw, they know Quint, and they've heard this story.
yeah.
You know,
It's one of the greatest monologues, and it's one of the great monologues in cinema history.
it might be the greatest monologue. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if there's anything that stands up to it. I don't know what stands up to it. Maybe Orson Welles as Harry Lime in The Third Man. Maybe that little Italian man who opens up The Godfather. I mean, these are memorable scenes that set up a story, but this is one that sets up passion and
That's an episode.
Yeah.
I mean, the acting in this fucking film.
Oh yeah.
Is Schreider has great chemistry with everybody, everybody, and then once we get to that scene, that night scene on the boat, I mean, it's boat stories, sea stories, battle scars, and it goes back to that cliche that you're taught: acting is reacting, and acting is listening. It's not just saying your lines to each other. You're actually listening and responding to what the other person is saying. Shaw goes into it. Did you see I sent you a reaction clip. I don't know if you saw it.
No, I didn't get a chance to see it, but I've seen so many discussions of, and this monologue is shrouded in mystery. There is nobody who can come to consensus on who wrote this or how it eventually came out in the movie. Carl Gottlieb, because this story is not in the book. This is a fabrication of the screenwriter. But it's a screenwriter's fabrication based on a real incident. So the USS Indianapolis was an actual ship during World War II. Who, you know, this actually occurred. The ship went down. I think it eventually got made into a movie. I think Nicolas Cage was actually in this, in one of his.
Of course he was.
Yeah, in one of his thousands of B movie films. But they might have done a TV movie about it as well with Stacy Keach. I can't remember. I mean, but this is a story that was made famous by this film, and the story is that the story within the film. Or the making of the film, I should say. The story in the making of the film is that Spielberg needed to create some kind of depth for the Quint character. I don't know if he had heard about the Indianapolis story or if the great John Milius had brought him the story. Yeah. So the story, Gottlieb says that it was in the original screenplay that he wrote it, but Milius says it was a complete creation of Milius.
Of course he said that.
Of course. And I don't know who...
cigar and he was like, I surfed a shark.
Okay,
and I love the smell of napalm in the morning. And I wrote a fucking 1,000-page fucking monologue.
Yeah. That was a movie in and of itself. And then Robert Shaw fell in love with the 10 pages, the supposed 10 to 15 pages that was in the script, but said, "There's no way I can memorize this whole thing. There's no way that I can deliver this scene." And Shaw, being a playwright and a poet himself, edited it down from the 10 pages or whatever to something like 4 or 5 pages.
Thank the gods.
Yeah. But in that story, I mean, I would love to read the original monologue that Milius wrote.
But have Milius read it.
Yeah. That would be great to have Milius read it in his bravado and his if you've never seen the Milius documentary, I recommend that. That's a really good watch, because Milius is one of those over the top characters that is so into his own mythology and legend that and I love him for it. I love Milius for it. I think as a filmmaker, horrible filmmaker. I mean, Red Dawn, The Lion in Winter, Big Wednesday, Conan the Barbarian is the only film that really jumps out at me and says, "Yeah, that's a great story." But that's another episode down the line.
Sure is.
Yeah, and I think Milch says the only guy that ever paid him back. So David Milch says that John Milius is the only guy that ever paid him back for any kind of borrowing money. Anyway. The story is that Shaw took the monologue, cut it down, and made it this tight little film within a film. And it's brilliant. But then there's also the story that Shaw showed up to the set drunk and meandered on for a 10-minute reel that couldn't be used. He was so drunk and so fucked up that he couldn't actually deliver the speech, and they had to reshoot it again. See, there's so many legends behind this story. There's so many. This film shouldn't have been made. It should never have been considered a possible production. The very idea that Spielberg refused to shoot on a back lot in a Universal sound stage, a tank, a lake, that he demanded that this film be shot on the ocean, something that I don't think would happen in a major production for another 20 years when Kevin Reynolds and Kevin Costner got it into their head to make Waterworld, and we know how that story went. So
amazing.
I mean, the lessons that were learned during the making of Jaws showed them that this is the kind of thing that could not be made. It just couldn't. But I dare you to make this film in a water tank and have it have the grandness and the power that it does. You can feel those waves. That shit looks real. And it looks real because they're on the ocean. They're actually shooting it out there. And, for novices, people who have no idea about tides, about the way weather can change, about the way the sun, I mean, it was a nightmare just making shit cut in this film because of the changing nature of both the sun, the clouds, and the waves. This film went something like 50 days over budget. And Spielberg in 1975 or 74, when this was being shot, was not the Steven Spielberg of 2024. He was not the Spielberg of 1992, 96. He was a first.
He was not the Spielberg of E.T.
No, he wasn't. Close Encounters, Raiders of the Lost Ark. He didn't have the cachet, and this was a huge gamble, and this film should have died. There's no reason that everything went wrong on this film, except for the fact that the things that went wrong were a blessing to the film, because this film owes a great deal to Hitchcock in the sense that Spielberg, when originally conceiving this material and originally figuring out a way to produce this film, depended on the shark being seen. Now, if you watch the film, and especially for me, because every moment that there's a real shark in the film, I know it's a real shark. Whenever it's a fake shark,
can see it.
Yeah.
You can see it swimming.
Yeah. There's only a handful of times when the shark in the pond, when it's swimming, when you can just see the top of it and it looks like a fucking submarine going across the water, that looks like it could possibly be real. It's not, but it looks like it could possibly be real. When you see the shark swimming around the boat underwater, I'm sitting there going, that's Ron and Valerie Taylor. That's their footage. And Ron and Valerie Taylor, if you don't know, were oceanographers, they were divers, and they were two of the first people to. They were probably the first two people to swim with sharks and document them in this manner and get the shots that were used in this film without a cage, being in the water. But when the shark attacks, when the shark attacks Hooper in the cage, that's fake. You can see it's fake. When the shark jumps on the stern, you're like, oh my god. And there's something about the eye, because even though it is a black eye, like a doll's eye, like a lifeless eye, there's not enough life in it. It's weird. There is more life to a real shark, and
Of course.
like he does something brilliant in it where I don't know how they get the shot, but it's one of the most famous shots in history of, because it wasn't something that was shot for this film. I think it was when you're shooting animals, nothing can be planned. It's just whatever the fuck you can get in the moment. And before the shark launches itself onto, is it the stern? Is it the back end of the boat, basically? There's a shot of a shark, a great white, coming out of the water and leaping towards the camera. You remember that? You remember that 1 second shot?
I don't know.
It's right before they cut to a side view of the shark landing, the whole body landing on it. That's a real shark. That's a real shark, and it's fucking beautiful. It's a beautiful creature, and it's a beautiful shot. I'm going to have to show you the shot. I'm going to have to get a fucking screenshot of it and show it to you, because I can't believe you don't remember it, because it's one of my favorite moments in the film, because especially, and I've seen this movie in a theater, and when that shark hits all of a sudden, it's an incredible moment of editing where for a second, of you seeing a real shark leap out of the water, because I think it comes from underneath. You see the shark swimming. You're under the water. You see the body and the belly of the shark swim left to right. Then there's a 1 second shot of the shark jumping into the camera. Then they cut to the shark landing on the boat. And all of it gives you that moment where, okay, this is believable. I got this. And it's a magical moment. When you're in a theater and that shark lands on the boat, you're just like, people are screaming. They're losing their fucking minds. This is one of those films that I really wish I could go back to and watch it for the first time, because I can't watch it with that sense of wonderment that I once had. I can only watch this film with a sense of love for cinema and the language of cinema, if that makes sense. So it's like I can no longer watch it with that open-eyed, childlike wonderment. I can only see it from the perspective of, my God, that was beautiful how they did that. And there are all kinds of moments like that in the film. So when the shark gets tangled up in the cage, that's a real shark. That is an actual moment where I've heard Ron and Valerie Taylor talking about it, where they thought they were going to lose that shark because they were afraid that the shark would get tangled up in that and drown. But it's such an incredibly powerful animal that it broke through the cage and busted it out, and it was incredible. I just marvel at that shit. I really do watch this with a sense of, this is a great movie to watch when you're a kid, because you're dumb. You have that sense of, oh, that could be real. You believe it.
Yeah.
And that's the great. I don't say that with. I'm not saying tongue in cheek. I'm not saying that with any kind of. I mean, I wish I could go back to that level of naivete and fascination and believing what I see on the screen, because when I saw it when I was a kid, the shark was real. The shark was absolutely real, and it was beautiful. So.
Well, I mean, that it's like there's an aspect of that to the that reaction video that I sent you. Go back and
I'll watch it, yeah,
and watch it just for that aspect of vicariously.
Yeah,
That's the the beauty of those kind of reaction videos. Whether it's, I've talked about this. I like to do it with music, music that I'm like super familiar with, but like this is a person's first time hearing it.
Well, yeah,
and you're watching them experience it for the first time, and so you're piggybacking off of that because you don't have that anymore. So it's this cut of different people who do reaction videos and there's in my mind, I'm also like, well, I know that you are on some level are performing in a reaction video because you're aware that you're being recorded and that this is how you do your thing, in the same sense that we're performing this conversation, right?
Yeah. There's a performance aspect, definitely.
But that being said, it's still there's something authentic to that performance. So it's like Robert Shaw in this scene. They're sitting around. It's at night. They're out there on the water hunting this shark. But there's a lull. So it's like the shark is now background. And they're in this moment, and it's the three of them. It's Roy Schreider. It's these three actors playing these three characters, right? So Robert Shaw, Roy Schreider, Richard Dreyfuss. And the scene is there. They're drinking and singing in the inside in this boat. And they start to compare scars. Yeah. And it's this like macho, silly thing. They're, oh, what is that? Blah, blah, blah. And then finally, Richard Dreyfuss opens his Henley or whatever, and he points to his chest and he says, whatever the name of the woman is, you probably know her name.
Mary Ellen Moffat.
Mary Ellen Moffat. And he goes, she broke my heart. And it's funny, and it's like, it's, I showed that scene to my mom because I wanted to do an experiment, because I said, have you seen Jaws, by the way? And then she was like, I don't know, whatever. She didn't remember. And I said, do me a favor, 5 minutes, watch this for me. And I basically, like, I'm watching, but I'm turning back to her.
Yeah.
And she's like all of us, like these people in the reaction video, they're laughing and they're just kind of like, okay. And then, where is this going? Right. And then Roy Schreider, his character, he points to Robert Shaw's arm and he says, well, what's that? And Robert Shaw just kind of blows it away. And this is the acting part. I'm talking about the acting, the performances, plus our reactions to it.
Yeah.
As we see this performance take place. He just, oh no, it was a
tattoo I had removed.
A tattoo I had removed. And then Richard Dreyfuss says, let me guess, mother. And then it's so funny. And then Robert Shaw just kind of smiles, and then, but not much more. And then the people in the reaction video are going like, he's not laughing.
Yeah. Where's this going? You know?
Yeah. And then he says, all that was the USS Indianapolis.
No, what he says is, he's like, let me guess, mother. He's like, Mr. Hooper.
Yeah.
That's a tattoo I had removed. Let me guess, mother. And then Shaw puts his hand out and he touches Dreyfuss's forearm. I've watched this scene so many times. I've imitated this scene. I've written it down and I've rehearsed it many times. He reaches out and he touches his forearm.
Was this an audition for you? Did you ever audition with this?
Oh, God, no. I wouldn't have the fucking balls to do this in an audition.
Okay.
I would not have the fucking balls to. I would do this on the bus when I was riding around L.A. I would do this speech.
Out loud?
Yeah.
You would tell the lady, the Spanish-speaking lady next to you, like a doll's eyes. You tell the gangster that was on the bus, you say,
I would say we'd form ourselves into tight little squares, kind of like like you see in a calendar, like in the Battle of Waterloo. And the idea was the shark come in. Yeah, I would do that. And what he would
You're celebrating your wife's Denise.
a big Chinaman take my arm over. He reaches over and he touches his forearm and he says, "Mr. Hooper, that's the USS Indianapolis." And Dreyfuss immediately
turns white.
Yeah. It's
goes
just
white.
like boom. He just like you and I got to give it to Dreyfuss. Man, he fucking delivers that moment
On the dime.
I'm just boom. You were on the Indianapolis, and then Shaw just goes, aye. And that's when they cut to Roy Schreider, and Schreider says, "What happened?"
Yeah. And it's acting is reacting. It's all bouncing. They're all bouncing off of each other. Richard Dreyfuss, it's a beat change.
Yeah. Richard
Dreyfuss is in one, and it's not just right now we're playing happy and right now we're playing this.
No, not at all.
It's that moment where your breath changes when in those technique is your breath changes, and you get that when you hear bad news and you get that jolt in the pit of your stomach. It's that. And it's like, oh, fuck. And so then the reaction video, some people are like, oh, was he in the Navy? But then it's still more kind of like, wait, what the fuck? Like, there's a sense of recognition because people, maybe they don't know this film. None of these people do. But they know how films work.
Yes.
And they know how stories work.
Well, there's a language.
And they know how,
So if you've watched enough film, even if you're not educated in the language of film, if you've watched film, that shit is going to dig into you, through osmosis, through the watching, so you can anticipate things. It's like when they do something in a film, like, spoiler alert, but if you watch To Live and Die in L.A. and you see William Peterson,
that's a big spoiler.
Yeah, I'm not going to say completely, but if you see with fucking 45 minutes still left in the movie what happens, you're completely caught off guard. You have
everyone
no
already
idea.
knows what if they, you know what I mean? Like, this proves the point.
Yeah.
Like, you may not have seen the film, but just that, what Rick just said, it's kind of like, oh shit, okay. Yeah. And then they talk about another film.
Like, how many times are you watching something and you're like, well, and that never happens. That almost never happens where you're shocked all of a sudden. In this film, you're anticipating it.
Yeah, we'll see. Even I was about to give it away too by mentioning another older film, but
which one?
Yeah,
what were you going to give away?
I'm not going to say it because then it's going to give it away.
Okay, but also it's like unconsciously or subconsciously. Not unconsciously, subconsciously. You're not even thinking about it, but there is a part of you that says, in that moment, when he says, "I," and Roy Schreider says, "What happened?" All of a sudden you realize, I'm going to find out exactly how fucked up this guy is. I'm going to find out exactly what drives him and why he is the man that he has become. And part of it is, it's like when you watch Once Upon a Time in the West, and we've talked about this. This whole film, 3 hours of this operatic spaghetti western, back and forth bullshit you're watching. You're wondering, what the fuck did Henry Fonda do to Bronson to make him come at him like that? Well, you know it's revenge. You know he killed somebody. That's obvious. There's no fucking, it's not a question. He killed somebody that he loved, maybe his wife, raped his wife, murdered his child, whatever. It's standard trope for the genre. But when you see the flashback, for Bronson, absolutely. But when you see that moment and you see the sadism involved in the history of these two men, it takes something that you thought you already understood. It takes something that you anticipated and believed, that you, in your fucking know-it-all bullshit type of I've seen everything, I know everything kind of mentality. And that's me as well as everybody who watches movies. Now you're knocked on your ass because you could not imagine a level of sadism like that. And in keeping with that, the Indianapolis is a true story. And now hearing it, all you can imagine is being in that water, waiting for your turn.
Grounded in reality.
Yeah. And that's the frightening thing. 1,100 men in the water, 316 come out. The shark took the rest.
Yeah.
And you're just like, you're knocked out.
Well, let's go a little bit further into it. So you've just gotten this shift in the scene.
Yeah.
Shaw gives a smile. He speaks in this vaguely West Country, Cornish, piratey kind of sounding accent that suits the kind of our cultural understanding of someone who's on a pirate or a seafarer or whatever. And he says, "A Japanese submarine slammed torpedoes into our side, chief." So then, now the people in the reaction video are like, "Oh shit!" So now that it's like, "Oh fuck!" Like you've been through some crazy shit in the sea, right? And a beginning actor a lesser actor would have gone right into the trauma of it.
Yeah.
Right into like, oh, it was so fucked up, because it was fucked up. But a good acting teacher, a good coach, a good director would make you earn that.
Yeah.
And the character is not going to go right into the fucking like, oh, here's everything, and then the floodgates open and blah, blah, blah. It's in the same way that when you describe someone or you're playing someone who's drunk, you're not playing someone who's drunk. You're playing someone who's trying to not seem drunk.
Yeah.
To a certain extent, you know what I mean? Like, you're playing against it. You're creating drama internally also. You're not just letting it all come out. So next he says, they had just delivered the Hiroshima bomb. So it's like, fuck. Okay, USS Indianapolis. Okay, fuck. Japanese submarine slammed into our side. Fuck. Okay, we had just delivered the Hiroshima bomb, but it was a secret mission. Fuck. And he keeps dropping these bombs, right?
Yeah.
But he's just doing it. He's building. Robert Shaw is building, but he's also holding back. He's kind of smiling. He's not ripping open his soul to tell you, oh, I'm in such fucking pain.
It's
and
weird.
Scarred me.
It's weird because he's so focused on certain details that it's like, like, ship went down in 12 minutes. We didn't see the first shark for a half hour. Tiger.
Yeah,
13-footer. You know how you know that when you're in the water, Chief? You can tell by looking for the tail to the dorsal.
It's all fucking like numbers and facts.
Oh, it's so to the point, and there's almost no emotion to it until it becomes overwhelming. And Shaw delivers it with such fucking emotion and power that you're just like, wow.
Secret fucking mission.
Yeah. They didn't even list us overdue for a week.
Yeah. That no distress signal had been sent.
Even listening to us, we're fighting over who gets to say the lines. Yeah.
And a lesser actor would have driven that heaviness home.
Yeah.
Maybe showing that, the outrage, the bitterness of it, not Shaw. It's part of it. He gets this, it's part smile and then it turns into a grimace.
Yeah.
And that's the pain.
Yeah.
He smiles through it and he just tells the tale. He basically follows in Hamlet. Shakespeare gives the advice to the actor through Hamlet. He says, "Speak the speech, I pray you. Just fucking say the lines," as David Mamet would basically say. And that's what he does. And then he goes on, because it isn't a World War II story. It isn't a submarine story. It isn't an atomic bomb story. It's a fucking shark story. Mm-hmm. It's a shark story. Because for a while we forget that. Then he starts talking about fucking how do you measure a fucking shark?
Yeah.
And then the people in the reaction video, as I'm saying it as if it's part of the film, but it's part of this add-on to it, they're like, oh, fuck. Oh, fuck. And then he starts talking about the sometimes that shark, he looks right into your eyes. Think about a shark. He's got lifeless eyes, black eyes, like a doll's eyes. All that, right?
He doesn't seem to be
Doesn't
living.
even seem to be living until he bites you. And these people, several of them in this reaction video that I sent you, they're going like, "Oh, that's fucking dark. Oh, fuck, that shit just got dark." And he just goes on and on about the high-pitched screaming, and the ocean turns red, and despite all your pounding and the hollering, they all come in and they rip you to pieces. We take it for granted.
Yeah.
We take that cinema lovers take that monologue in this film for granted. And on the other extreme, people who don't know cinema, they don't know that not even buried, but in the center of this fucking film is, like, as we've said, probably it's one of the greatest, if not the greatest monologue in cinema history.
Yeah.
I mean, that's fucking like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And fucking, and the magic of cinema, that it's like, it's not like the stars aligned and you had fucking the greatest fucking novelist, and then the greatest screenwriter fucking adapted it, and then the greatest director, whatever that means, and then the greatest actor, and the greatest cinematographer, and the greatest editor, and the greatest, and all these things, and then all of them combined created this moment. It's kind of like, well, no one even fucking knows exactly or we don't know exactly at this point how this moment happened. People were involved. The Quint character was maybe based on this guy, maybe based on that guy. The actor who his head pops out in that jump scare, he was a real fucking local character. I forget his name. Whatever, all these things, but it's just kind of like Steven Spielberg could never make the same film. Steven Spielberg could go back into a time machine from that same year and try to remake the film, and he wouldn't have been able to. This is this is when lightning strikes.
Yeah.
And it only strikes once. And the film looks simple. It looks straightforward. It's fun. On some level, it's an action film. It's an adventure, whatever. It's one of those things that, for whatever reason, was not only successful, but was this American cinematic masterpiece.
I think it hits a lot of the buttons. Yeah, I mean, well, the thing about it is there's a fascination with the unknown. And human beings, for the most part, we love to be afraid. And yeah, you can be afraid by a Michael Myers or by a Freddy Krueger, these creations that there's a level of insanity that exists in this world that can manifest itself in such a way. The Ted Bundys, the Dahmers, the John Wayne Gacy's. There's a level of cruelty. And,
these 1970s characters.
Exactly. But to imagine a creature like a great white shark, who, as is described in the film, is a perfect eating machine. It lives to swim and eat and make baby sharks, and that's all it does. And that is all it does. That's all it does. But what else is it supposed to do? It's no different than a lion or a tiger. It's no different than any other predatory animal. And it exists in this world. What fascinates people is that if you go to the beach, this is what fascinates most people and what scares the shit out of me. The water is so dark and murky that I have no idea what's underneath there. That's what scares the shit out of me. I'm not a good swimmer either, so there's the fear of drowning. But what it really is not knowing what's underneath that water and knowing that anything can be there. The likelihood of being attacked and killed by a shark is almost non-existent. But can you imagine a worse way of dying? And watching Quint slide down that boat into the shark's mouth.
Gaping fucking
Is it just
gaping mouth. It's like you're sliding into a fucking Volkswagen.
It's so fucking incredible. That's one of the few times where the fakeness of the shark doesn't bother me. It's just like that shark is just chomping and chomping and chomping, and Quint is kicking and he's trying to get up and he grabs Brody's hand and he slips, and that moment where the shark bites him mid-waist and Shaw screams and the blood starts coming out of his mouth and he's going back and forth while Shaw is still trying to stab him with the machete. I mean, if you haven't seen that in a movie theater, you've missed out on one of the great movie watching experiences, because the audience is on its feet. The audience is losing its mind watching this happen. And I you talk about an audience reaction video. I kind of had that because I showed this to my nephew. I showed this movie to my nephew, and he was just like, and he was like 13 or 14 at the time, so he was still young enough that it could resonate in the way that I wanted it to resonate. I mean, I wanted him to be afraid. I wanted him to be excited. I wanted him to have nightmares, because that's when you know you've had a good time. You know what I mean? Because come on, that's what other way is there to have a fucking great time than to know that this shit is living rent free in your head? It's just sitting there. I want to be afraid of the water, because then the movie did its job. How many times am I going to go to the fucking ocean? But Jaws is going to live in my head over and over and over again. That fear, and I just love it. I love every second of it. And the film, the first film at least, because there were a number of sequels, each getting worse as they progressed, culminating with Jaws 4: The Revenge, probably if not the worst movie ever made, one of the worst films ever made. But this is a masterpiece. I just wish I could watch it again with the same... with just the same excitement. I just wish I wasn't so technical about when I watched it. Do you know what I mean with that?
Of course. Yeah. I mean, it just goes back to did I ever tell you the story about the tiger?
What about the tiger?
Leslie and I went to a safari park,
mm-hmm.
however many years ago, and this is what I think about when I think about that the black eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Aside from when I'm mashing that up with Michael Myers, there was a path in between these two tiger enclosures. On one side, on the left side, was the male, and on the right side was the female. And the male wanted desperately to get over to the side of the female.
Yeah.
Because he could smell the female, and he was fucking going nuts, and he was fucking pissing everywhere and spraying, and just really fucking like blue balled, right?
Yeah.
And it's fucking dusk. It's like magic hour. And the light is like Terrence Malick light. And we're on this path, and we're like right in the center of this path. And we're paying attention, at least I am, and I'm not as visual as Leslie. So I'm super like zoned in on this fucking male tiger and his behavior and his fucking like his antics, right? And then, low, flat tone, Leslie says my name. And I turn. And on the other side, on the right side, a few feet from us, and it's like the path, and then there's like a fucking, some kind of like chain link type fence. And then a few feet from the fence is like some kind of netting with another fence or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And just on the other side of that barrier that was beyond was the female.
And
And
you
her
hadn't seen
fucking
the
head
female
was.
or what?
I had seen the female when I first got onto the path.
Mm-hmm.
But I had turned and I'm looking at the male.
Oh, okay. So you were, yeah, okay. I
My
get you.
back was, and so, and it's not even that I hadn't seen the female, it's that I hadn't fucking heard the female.
Oh, yeah.
And so when Leslie says my name, I just turn and looking dead fucking at me, like dead fucking at me, was that female fucking tiger. And it's like, fucking clever girl, right? Because it was like, and it wasn't like they weren't raptoring me. They didn't do a fucking
Mm-hmm.
tag team effort. It was just this fucking tiger was right there, and obviously, had none of those barriers been there, I would not have lived to tell the fucking tale of the tiger with the blackest eyes, like a dog's eyes, and the fucking thing was as big as my chest, the fucking head, and the thing was just looking, not even at me, it was looking through me. Now imagine a fucking animal that could swallow that fucking tiger.
Yeah.
Um,
Was that the most frightened you've been? Waiting for your turn?
it wasn't even frightening. It was just it was the awesomeness of like, it's beyond frightening.
Yeah.
Because it's just kind of like, I'm so fucking like fragile as a human being, and this thing is so like, all you can do is just feel a sense of awe and respect for this fucking beautiful fucking creature that will eat your ass. It'll fucking eat your ass.
And that's the level of respect, I think, that is lost in society because of this movie. Now, you and I get it, and I think there's a number of people who do as well. But what you end up with are a bunch of idiots who are out on that fucking ocean throwing chum into the water going, what are they doing? They're chumming. They're tracking that shark, Yeah. Nobody's going to get out of the harbor alive, And it's at that point where I look at people and I think, I'm rooting for the shark. I'm sorry. The good people will survive by not bothering with this bullshit. But those who have to die, at some point you got to weed out the dummies. And I love this film. I love this film for the technique, for the ability that it has to frighten, for the fact that everything was against Spielberg and everybody else involved in this film, that the shark never worked, and he chose, instead of abandoning it or trying to shoot with the shark regardless, to go the Hitchcock route, and whatever isn't seen is more frightening. Because how much do you actually see the shark in this movie? You see those fucking barrels. And that scares the shit out of you.
That's better.
Yeah, that and John Williams' 2-note score. Dun, 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 dun. And it's like, how often that shit whenever I'm in the water, whenever I have been in the water, whether I've been at the beach or in a pool, some asshole always does that. Have you ever noticed that?
Yeah.
You're in the water and some asshole goes dun 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 dun, and you're just like, you fucking asshole. I get what you're doing. Fucking stop it.
You're looking for that fin.
Exactly. You're just looking for that motherfucker. Where's the tail? Where's the dorsal? Where's the tail? So I can figure out how long this motherfucker is, because that's how you tell when you're in the water, Chief. This shit comes back to me all the time. There's so many moments where it's like the the fear in Brody, which is me, the, what do you call it? The obsessiveness of Shaw. He can't go under with 3 barrels. Not with 3, he can't. How many times does he fucking repeat that shit to himself? He can't go under with 3. Not with 3, he can't. I love that.
He defies all that he knows.
And that's the thing. He doesn't understand. That moment where he just finally breaks down. He keeps his composure and he says, "Mr. Hooper, what can you do with these things of yours?" That's a moment for him where he is completely dumbfounded, and he has nothing left to bring to this party. I love that moment. And Shaw underplays it because he knows that the character doesn't want to have to. He doesn't want to give it over to this kid from the Oceanographic Institute with soft hands, with city hands. You know, there's so much great acting in this film. We're going to talk about another film for next week's episode where it's the complete opposite of the acting in this film.
Sure is.
But it's the right actors to do that shit with. It is the absolute. They could have picked better over actors, and we're going to get into that. But this film, I don't see the acting. You know what I mean? Everything in this film is natural. Even that scumbag mayor, Murray Hamilton. You see what he's doing. He's like, yeah. I was in the best interest. But his argument to the chief of police makes sense. When you say barracuda, people say what? When they say shark, you got a panic on your hands.
Yeah,
and he's right.
Yeah, I mean,
what do you do?
It's like COVID. It's like how do you balance out, like, those were the arguments. It was like business versus public health versus like people's freedoms versus fucking like how do you protect each other from each other versus, you know what I mean? Personal freedom versus the interests of the group and all this shit. And it's kind of like, all you need is Dennis Hopper to go, he's out there. He's out there. Because he is out there.
Yeah.
That thing is out there. And fuck, this film still fucking holds up.
The film still holds up. I just wish the only thing I can do is show it to a new audience every once in a while. Like I showed it to my nephew and he loved it. One day he'll have a kid and I'll show it to that kid. And I just know that's one of the great moments when you watch a movie and you fall in love with it. But when you see a younger generation fall in love with the same thing that you did, still to this day, one of the great moments in my movie watching life was watching Fight Club.
Exactly. We always go back to that. Yeah.
That kid was 16 years old, wasn't he? 15, 16 years old?
I have no fucking idea.
I don't know. But it was like the excitement that kid had telling his dad what a great movie he had just watched. And you and I thought the exact same thing at the same time. And it was just like we were thrilled to have been there to see it. As great as it was seeing that film in a theater again, that made it for me. So, like, when I can show this to somebody who hasn't seen it, it's like, wow. Because this attacks every subconscious fear that you might have. That darkness, man. There's something in that darkness, man. There's something under that water. I don't know what the fuck is in that water, but it's there.
Close up that southern border, because they're out there.
And they're coming.
Those Democrats and liberals and fucking immigrants are out there. It's the only risk at this point is, I mean, you're going to get your Megs and all that nonsense.
Yeah.
But it's like, don't fucking remake this. Don't try to fucking remake this.
At some point they will. But we still have this. We still have this. We still have this great film. The only thing that bothers me about a remake is if people go to the remake instead of seeing this film. If there's
Doesn't need to be remade.
it doesn't need to be. Well, when has that ever mattered? You know, it doesn't
should.
matter. It should. It absolutely should, but it doesn't. I mean, it's going to happen one
And
day.
look, and the thing is a fucking remake. The
Yeah.
Carpenter's the Thing, and it's better.
Mhm.
But it's
But you're talking about the
certain
difference
things.
between source material that a better adherence to source material versus, and I've read Jaws. Jaws is not that great on paper. This is a visual story. There's a lot of bullshit involved in that story. There's a lot of subplots. There's an affair between Brody's wife and Hooper. It's unnecessary. There's a lot of shit that's just unnecessary. The ending of it isn't all that great. But what Spielberg, this is definitely something that is, the film is better than any book that it originated from. This is a fucking cinematic masterpiece, and it deserves to be remembered almost 50 years later with the same excitement and respect that it has accrued over these years. It's an incredible film.
Listen, if the tides break over you at night, if you look out or wake up and you see that fucking fin, you wake up in a cold sweat, or you go to the cinema in a cold sweat, and you find that you're scared but no distress signal has been sent, buymeacoffee.com. Come back to us. Buymeacoffee.com/WatchRickRamos. This one goes to guess the fuck who? Cornelius Burroughs. Surprise, surprise. Thanks very much. See you next time.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.